So the first thing I want to start, or how I want to start, is by saying that there's no real such thing as a standard drug test, right? There's not one drug test that goes, here's your drug test, this is what everybody uses everywhere. The most common types are a 9-panel or a 10-panel drug test. So for example, so those tests are categorized by panels. Those panels are categories of drugs, not actually specific drugs. So for example, amphetamines is one panel of a test, but they actually include multiple drugs under that. Barbiturates is another one. Sleeping pills, downers, they actually have 5 to 6 different drugs underneath that one panel category. So when you do a drug test, you're not actually searching for one specific drug at a time, you're searching through a whole category of them. The main difference between a 9 or a 10 panel is that a 10 panel will usually include opiates and a 9 panel will not. Here at Commercial Investigations, we're able to provide that standard 9 or 10 panel. We have a 10 panel plus oxy, and we also have a 10 panel plus expanded opiates plus MDMA, and then minus THC, if that's something that your business is interested in doing. That test that I just mentioned is our best one. It usually keeps everything fully compliant that you may need. And then also, if you're thinking about removing that THC, we have that option for you as well. You may have noticed, or you may have caught, that I said a 10-panel oxy and a 10-panel expanded opiates. Aren't those the same thing, right? You might be thinking that. They're actually not the same thing. So oxy is an opioid, which is man-made synthetic. It's made to act like an opiate, which is natural. Those react differently in your brain, and therefore they need to be tested for differently. So that's why I say we have those 2 separate tests there. And any of the ones that I say today are all urine tests. That's basically the ones that we deal with the most here. So any of those ones that I mentioned or ones that I'm going to mention, you can think a urine test, right? So occasionally we get clients that get a little nervous because they say they order a 9-panel drug test and they see 14 different drugs on that panel and they say, what the hell happened? There must have been a mistake, right? There's not. Slow down. The first thing you need to know is that there's a couple different types of labs in New York. So Commercial Investigations uses LabCorp and Quest as our labs. They report slightly differently, but they look pretty much the same on your end. I need to clarify before going any further that labs and testing sites are 2 different locations, okay? So when your applicant goes into the testing site to give their test, that is not the lab. That needs to be sent to the lab to be tested and then sent back to you with the results. So sometimes we get clients asking, well, my applicant went in today and they put their test in today, where are my results? Well, they're not. The test is still at the testing facility, it's not at the lab yet. That's something that we just like to clarify for clients. Going back to that test, if you see that you have more than 9 drugs on your 9-panel drug test, you did not get charged anything extra, you still ran a 9-panel drug test. That means, though, is that your applicant hit on a couple of those drugs in one of those panels in one of those categories. So if you see more than 9, that means that your applicant did hit on one of those. At that point, we would recommend that you reach out to your applicant and ask about possibly any prescriptions that they might have, or if there is any legitimate reason that they would have hit on one of those tests. So
can I just stop you for one quick second there? So the MRO, the medical review officer, would actually reach out to the applicant, and they will reach out several times and hopefully reach them. And if what they tested positive for is a valid prescription, they would then pass the results on to us as negative. If they don't reach the donor, then they may send us results that may state that they are positive, but not being evaluated by the MRO at that point if they have a valid prescription. So it's not the client themselves that would, first off be reaching out to them if a positive result comes back. The MRO would actually be the first one that either spoke with them or tried to reach out to them.
Okay, yeah. So before we open up the floor for questions for you, Yvette, what would happen if the MRO was not able to contact the applicant after that applicant tested positive for one of those drugs?
So they'll only reach out a couple of times because they can't keep all of the results just kind of hanging out, waiting to speak to someone. So after attempting a couple times, if they don't hear back, they will send the results to us, and in turn the client, and you will see that the full result will state non-contact positive. So if it says non-contact positive, it means just that. They did not make contact with the donor. So they did not have the opportunity to verify whether or not they had a valid prescription for the drug that they tested positive for. So in that case, what I recommend is that you reach out to your applicant and ask them to reach out to the MRO, and possibly the MRO had a wrong phone number. That's the reason they couldn't reach them, something like that. So you want to reach out to your applicant and ask them to call the MRO office and talk with them, and then if the results would change based off of their conversation, they would send us an updated report. The initial electronic chain of custody form that you give your applicant, or they can pull it up online, not necessarily have to print it out on paper, but it will have the contact information for the MRO doctor. So there is a phone number right there. So that is the number that you would want to direct them to call and speak with someone.
Okay. Another one that we get that's fairly popular with our clients is, what does it mean when a test shows up negative dilute? Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? What does that mean for my applicant?
So negative dilute, number one, the good thing is that this does not mean that anything at all tested positive. There's no, it was sort of positive, it might have been positive, nothing has come back positive. What that means is that the specimen has basically too much water in it, like an unusual amount of water. So it could just be that that human being drinks a lot of water, or it could be that they are, attempting to possibly skew the test. So, I get a common question, well, what should I do? If you do not want your applicant's report to just state negative dilute, if you have to have a negative result to be compliant, then my recommendation is that you would have to set them up for a second test. You would have to send them for a second test. So you would want to speak with them and explain to them that we would want you to go first thing in the morning. Don't drink a lot of liquids before you go, and that kind of thing. So that way you're kind of letting them know that you don't want to be drinking a lot. We just want to make sure that the results that we're getting are 100% accurate.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And as a New York State employer, how do businesses remain compliant with the new marijuana laws, the MRTA law? How do people do that? How do you stay compliant?
Well, so what I tell people is to check with your legal counsel, because it's a very confusing situation as it is now. When you have that marijuana is illegal federally, but yet states can make up their own laws as far as whether it's legal for medicinal purposes, whether it's legal for social purposes, or both. It makes it very confusing for employers and very difficult to kind of know what to do as far as what is the right thing. So I recommend that each company reaches out to their legal counsel for advice on what to do with that right now.
Okay.